Welcome back. Let's get right into it. In today's explainer, we're unpacking a profound truth about the Vinaya, the monastic codes of Buddhism. From the outside looking in, these rules can easily look like just a massive, rigid list of do-nots. But as we dive into the original texts today, a completely different reality emerges. We're going to see how the world-honored one's seemingly strict rules are actually profound acts of spiritual mercy. They aren't a prison at all. They're literally a fortress.
Just picture this rather startling exchange. According to the texts, the Buddha and his attendant Ananda were out walking when they stumbled across a hidden hoard of treasure that had been washed up by heavy rains. The Buddha stops, points right at this pile of earthly wealth, and simply says, "Poisonous snake, Ananda." And Ananda looks at it and replies, "A vicious poisonous snake, world-honored one." They don't touch a single coin. They just keep walking.
Now, to really grasp the Buddha's reaction here and the precepts in general, we need to understand the concept of pacittiya. It's a term you'll see a lot in the monastic codes. Technically, it translates to an offense that requires repentance. But listen closely. We can't look at this as just some arbitrary worldly punishment. It's a vital, urgent warning against a deep spiritual obstacle. It's like a physical poison in the bloodstream. If a pacittiya isn't drawn out through repentance, it will absolutely burn and obstruct your path to true liberation.
Part 1. The Poisonous Snake and Guarding Against Greed. To see this spiritual protection play out in real time, let's look at a poor man who happened to overhear the Buddha's warning about that treasure and decided to completely ignore it. He thinks to himself, "These monks are crazy calling gold a snake. I'm taking it." So he hauls the treasure home. And look how incredibly fast this unchecked greed escalates into a literal death sentence. He starts flaunting his sudden wealth, building huge houses, buying up herds, which immediately draws the jealousy of the king. The king swoops in, confiscates absolutely everything, and orders the man's execution for hoarding undeclared treasure. This just brilliantly illustrates that the Buddha's harsh words weren't some random restriction on being wealthy. The worldly eye looks at that dirt and sees only a pile of gold. But the compassionate, awakened reality saw the entire karmic chain reaction. The snake was the deadly greed and the inevitable, total destruction that the treasure was going to bring. It was a protective shield the whole time. And here's the amazing part. Bound right there at the execution block, the man finally gets it. In a moment of clarity, he cries out, "Poisonous snake, Ananda, a vicious poisonous snake, world-honored one." Now the king hears this bizarre final plea and stops the execution to question him. Once the king hears the full story of the Buddha's warning, he realizes the man's innocence, spares his life, and actually rewards him. Just by remembering the world-honored one's words, the man was set free. It completely proves the profound protective power of the precept. Which brings us to Part 2, Protecting Beings and Preventing Worldly Criticism. We see this exact same fiercely protective compassion in the rules governing how the Sangha interacts with the secular world. Monastic rules don't just protect the monks inside the walls, they protect the harmony of the communities around them. Take this ancient, seemingly mundane rule forbidding monks from lighting open fires without cause. If you just read it as a dry text, it sounds super rigid, right? Like a random ban on staying warm. But you have to look at the actual event that triggered it.
Here's what happened. An old monk was feeling cold, so he lights a fire in a wooded area that happened to be shared with a caravan of traveling merchants. Well, the heat from his fire drives an actual, very real, venomous snake out of a log. The monk gets startled and screams. The merchants, hearing this blood-curdling scream in the pitch dark, completely panic and assume they're being ambushed by bandits. In the utter chaos of drawing weapons in the dark, these merchants nearly end up killing each other.
So the master's true intent here was never actually about the fire itself. The rigid view sees a ban on warmth, sure, but the compassionate reality reveals a deep, mindful protection of society. One monk's careless action caused a massive panic and almost cost innocent lay people their lives. The rule was born purely from a desire to maintain absolute peace and harmony with a chaotic secular world. Let's move to Part 3, Compassion for the Vulnerable, focusing on the story of Rahula. While these rules heavily protect the laity, the world-honored one's mercy extends most deeply to the vulnerable right in front of him. This is so vividly seen in the story of Rahula, the Buddha's own son who entered the monastic order as a young boy. At the time, there was a very strict rule against fully ordained monks sleeping in the same quarters as unordained novices.
So imagine the profound heartbreak when young Rahula is forced out by visiting guest monks due to a rigid interpretation of this rule, leaving him completely exposed to the elements with nowhere to sleep.
Left with literally nowhere else to go, this young boy goes out to the outhouse and tries to sleep on the wooden toilet planks. And as a harsh storm rolls in, a highly dangerous snake seeks refuge right beneath him. But the Buddha, deep in meditation, senses his young disciple, his own son, is in mortal danger. He doesn't hesitate. He immediately goes to the outhouse, uses his divine power to safely wake the boy, and brings him right into his own quarters for the night.
And right then and there, the Buddha instantly alters the rule. He declares that unordained novices are now granted permission to share lodging for 2 nights to ensure they're safely protected from beasts and the weather. I love this because it perfectly proves that the law serves the practitioner, not the other way around. These rules aren't cold mandates. They are living boundaries of care.
Part 4. Destroying Evil. Fierce Compassion.
Now, we cannot mistake this gentle compassion for weakness. As any rigorous Dharma master will tell you, true spiritual mercy sometimes requires incredibly fierce boundaries. Compassion isn't only about comforting the vulnerable. Sometimes it's about decisively cutting out that which destroys the soul. We see this exact scenario when monks like Aritha and the novice Magga started spreading a highly toxic view. They're openly claiming that worldly desires, specifically lust and sensory indulgence, don't actually harm your spiritual progress. When pure spiritual poison like that is introduced to twist the teachings, severe, immediate action has to be taken.
Yet look at how the Sangha handles it. The procedure is beautifully patient, but it's ultimately absolute. First, there's a gentle verbal reprimand. If that fails, they are given 3 formal communal warnings, practically begging the individual to drop the harmful view. It's only if they stubbornly refuse to release that toxic mindset that they are formally expelled. The community always seeks to cure the mind before excising the dangerous influence.
Because letting the student harbor views that will actively destroy their spiritual life, that is profoundly uncompassionate. It's a false kindness. True mercy is strict, and it is unyielding against ignorance. Expelling the unrepentant saves the purity of the community, yes, but it also stops that individual from accumulating even more dark, destructive karma. Finally, Part 5. Precepts as Armor. The Path to Liberation.
When we zoom out and look at the entire structure of the monastic codes, we start to realize that every single detailed rule in the Vinaya functions as a layer of impenetrable spiritual armor. For example, the texts contain these meticulous rules stating that new robes must be deliberately ruined in color. They have to be dyed with impure shades like blue, mud, or madder root. Why? Because back then, pure, brightly colored cloth was incredibly valuable. Destroying its secular value physically protected the monks from being targeted and murdered by highway robbers, while simultaneously shielding their minds from the ego and vanity of wearing fine clothes.
So is a rule like that a punishment? Absolutely not. It's a shield. Throughout the texts, whenever the Buddha establishes a rule, he clearly states it is for the sake of 10 benefits. Every single boundary drawn by the Buddha was initiated solely for the sake of these spiritual benefits, to protect the Sangha, to inspire faith in society, and to lead the minds of the practitioners straight toward ultimate peace.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway for your own journey. We've seen how the Buddha's highly meticulous rules were actually profound expressions of care and protection. So I want to leave you with this. If the Buddha's strictness was purely designed to protect our peace, what compassionate boundaries are you failing to set in your own life? How might the architecture of discipline become the very key to your personal liberation? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and keep seeking wisdom.